Roger assumes that evolution is just like creationism, which is 1, false, and 2, hilarious, because that means that due to his accurate representation of creationism and his straw man of evolution, this whole time Roger is accidentally trashing on his own worldview, while not managing to land a single blow on evolution. Welcome to Answers in Genesis, a series where I will be going over the website Answers in Genesis and, well, refuting what they have to say, because boy is it a lot. For this series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the article point by point, and then refute each point, or I guess affirm it if it's a good point. So, let's begin. So the article begins with a quote. The quote is, "Even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic." Dr. Scott Todd. So this comes from a letter to the editor regarding the Kansas Board of Education's decision to eliminate the required teaching of evolution in public schools. Well, he does say this. The full quote is, "Even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic. Of course, the scientist as an individual is free to embrace a reality that transcends naturalism." He isn't saying that science is anti-God, he's saying that science is the study of the natural world, while theology is the study of the supernatural. His argument is that if the evidence pointed to a creator, then that is not a scientific mechanism, but rather a supernatural mechanism. He isn't saying that science and the supernatural are in opposition to each other, but rather that they are different things. Many people do not realize that science was actually developed in Christian Europe by men who assumed that God created an orderly universe. It wasn't. It was developed separately in multiple different places. The Mayans developed astronomy. The Greeks measured the circumference of the Earth. The Chinese also developed astronomy. The Islamic Golden Age produced medicine, among a lot of other scientific advancements. Christian Europe did make a great contribution to science, that can't be denied, but to say it was developed in Christian Europe solely is just outright false. If the universe is a product of random chance, or a group of gods that interfere in the universe, there is really no reason to expect order in nature. The scientific community does not hold a belief that the universe is a product of random chance. Additionally, a product of random chance is not necessarily chaotic. Also, many polytheistic societies did expect order in nature, so the second half of that sentence is wrong too. Many of the founders of the principal scientific fields, such as Bacon, Galileo, Kepler, and Newton, were believers in a recently created Earth. And the evidence for an old Earth comes from recent contributions by geology, physics, evidence that was not known at the time of these scientists. Germ theory was also not known or believed by these scientists, yet it's still true. The idea that science cannot accept a creationist perspective is a denial of scientific history. There is no claim that science cannot accept the perspective of a creationist. The claim is that science is the study of natural phenomena. To help us understand that science has practical limits, it is useful to divide science into two different areas: operational science and historical, or origins, science. This won't help you understand that it has practical limits, but sure, go ahead. Operational science deals with testing and verifying ideas in the present and leads to the production of useful products like computers, cars, and satellites. That is correct. Historical, or origins science, involves interpreting evidence from the past and includes the models of evolution and special creation. Evolution does not involve interpreting evidence from the past. That is evolutionary history. Evolution is the idea that mutations occur, there's a variation in traits, that traits are inherited, that there's a scarcity of resources, and that some traits make it more likely that an organism will be able to reproduce. Recognizing that everyone has presuppositions that shape the way that they interpret the evidence is an important step in realizing that historical science is not equal to operational science. Yes, everyone has presuppositions, but that is a problem with operational science as well. That's why the scientific community is so important. It opens the door for others to contradict those presuppositions and offer an alternative to be judged on how well it fits the evidence. If it's a problem with both sciences, you can't say that historical science isn't equal to operational science. Because no one was there to witness the past, except God, we must interpret it based on a set of starting assumptions. Or, hear me out, we interpret the past based on what models fit the data. Creationists and evolutionists have the same evidence, they just interpret it within a different framework. How much evidence creationists deny, I'm going to go ahead and say that they don't have the same evidence. But it is fair to say that creationists do take a unique approach to any evidence that is shared. Evolution denies the role of God in the universe, and creation accepts his eyewitness account, the Bible, as the foundation for arriving at a correct understanding of the universe. No, evolution denies the creation of humanity in one day. But yes, the beliefs of creationism are founded on the Bible rather than evidence. In its original form, science simply meant knowledge. Fun fact, but irrelevant to the discussion. When someone says today that they work in the field of science, a different picture often comes to mind. Believe it or not, words and definitions change. Science, in the view of an outspoken part of the scientific community, is the systematic method of gaining knowledge about the universe by allowing only naturalistic or materialistic explanations and causes. It's not an outspoken part of the community, it's basically the entire community. And yes, science is limited today towards that which is natural, with the supernatural being its own area of study. The quote on page 19 reflects this attitude. Yes. Science, in this sense, automatically rules out God and the possibility that he created the universe because supernatural claims, it is asserted, cannot be tested and repeated. No, the supernatural is just not the domain of science. If an idea is not testable, repeatable, observable, and falsifiable, it is not considered scientific. Yes. The denial of supernatural events limits the depth of understanding that science can have and the types of questions science can ask. There's a difference between avoidance of supernatural explanations and flat-out denial. Any denial of supernatural events is due to lack of evidence, and the only science that is limited by the denial of supernatural events is bad science. We may define naturalism and materialism as naturalism, a belief denying that an event or object has a supernatural significance, specifically the doctrine that scientific laws are adequate to account for all phenomena. Materialism, a belief claiming that physical matter is the only or fundamental reality, and that all organisms, processes, and phenomena can be explained as manifestations or interactions of matter. I mean, if that's how you want to define it. The problem with the above definition of science is that even though naturalistic science claims to be neutral and unbiased, it starts with a bias. No. The problem with the above definition of science is that it isn't a definition of science. As I've explained before, science is not a denial of the supernatural. The quote from Dr. Todd on page 19 demonstrates that bias. Only matter and energy exist, and all explanations and causes must be directly related to the laws that matter and energy follow. If only Roger would have read Dr. Todd's full quote, then I wouldn't have to sit here correcting him. He never said only matter and energy exist, he said that matter and energy are the domain of science. Even if the amazingly intricate structure of flagella and bacteria appears so complex that it must have a designer, naturalistic science cannot accept that idea because this idea falls outside the realm of naturalism/materialism. The flagellum is most likely a repurposed Type 3 secretory and transport system, something that started out injecting toxins into eukaryotic cells and already had most of the parts required for a flagellum. This explanation does not require a designer. Saying it must have a designer is willful ignorance of how evolution works. But yes, naturalistic science will look for explanations that fall within its domain. Many scientists have claimed that allowing supernatural explanations into our understanding of the universe would cause us to stop looking for answers and just declare God wanted to do it that way. This is, of course, false. That's fair. The ability to study the world around us is only reasonable because there is a lawgiver who established the laws of nature. Well, first of all, I would avoid capitalizing lawgiver. There is nothing about the laws of nature that require the Christian God, or even a God. Most people do not realize that modern science was founded by men who believed that nature can be studied because it follows the laws given to it by the lawgiver. I feel like most people are aware that in Christian Europe, the scientists were Christian. Many founders of scientific disciplines, such as Bacon, Newton, Kepler, Galileo, Pascal, Boyle, Dalton, Linnaeus, Mendel, Maxwell, and Kelvin, were Bible-believing Christians. And, as a matter of fact, the most discerning historians and philosophers of science have recognized that the very existence of modern science had its origins in a culture at least nominally committed to a biblical worldview. Again, and this does nothing to justify a creationist worldview. What then should Christians think of science? That it is a methodology for discovering and understanding natural causes of phenomena. Science has been hijacked by those with a materialistic worldview and exalted as the ultimate means of obtaining knowledge about the world. No, it hasn't. Galileo and Newton, regardless of their worldview, viewed science as the key to understanding the world around them. Proverbs tells us that the fear of God, not science, is the beginning of knowledge. Well, Proverbs is wrong. The fear of God was not the beginning of the discovery of the circumference of the earth. It was not the beginning of medicine or astronomy. It was not the beginning of a lot of the knowledge we have today. You know what was the beginning of all that knowledge? Questions, observations, and testing. In a biblical worldview, scientific observations are interpreted in light of the truth that is found in the Bible, and that is its weakness. It rejects plausible explanations because they don't align with an allegedly spiritual book. If conclusions contradict the truth revealed in Scripture, the conclusions are rejected. This is how science and creationism differ. Science draws conclusions based on what fits the evidence, and creationism denies evidence and explanations if they do not fit within the conclusion that they need to be correct. The same thing happens in naturalistic science. Any conclusion that does not have a naturalistic explanation is rejected. No, any conclusion that doesn't have a naturalistic explanation does not fall under the definition of science. Rejection is an assertion of falsity. Science does not take a stance on the supernatural because they are different subject matters. The words creation and evolution can be used in many different ways. Oh, they definitely will be. Evolution will be used in this book to describe the naturalistic process that is alleged to have turned molecules into man over billions of years. That's not the actual definition of evolution, but okay. Evolution deals with what happens after the origin of life. Abiogenesis is what actually deals with the molecules to life part, not evolution. As creation is used throughout this book, it is intended to describe the supernatural acts of God who created the universe and everything in it in 6 approximately 24-hour days about 6,000 years ago. There are several Christians who would beg to differ on that definition, but go ahead and use it. This perspective is often referred to as young earth creationism. Yep, the true history of the universe is revealed to us from God's eyewitness perspective in the Bible. That is a very bold and untrue assertion. Young earth creationism runs against the evidence we have for how the world, universe, and everything in it was formed. Merely asserting it as truth cannot undo all the damage that has been done to it by the facts of the universe. This is also assuming that God exists, which is its own bold assertion. Its history can be summarized as the 7 C's of history: creation of the universe, corruption of the universe as a result of man's sin, the judgment of mankind and the catastrophe of Noah's flood, confusion of languages at Babel, Christ coming to earth to live a righteous life and then to pay for our sins on the cross, and the future consummation when God creates the new heaven and the new earth. I'm glad they found a way to summarize the Bible through alliteration. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. This history serves as a foundation for interpreting evidence in the biblical creationist worldview. Again, this is the problem with young earth creationism. It doesn't let evidence verify the suggested models, it makes base assumptions and tries to shove the evidence into it like a square peg in a round hole. Making a distinction between 2 types of scientific study helps us to understand the limitations of naturalistic presuppositions in science. Operational, or observational science is a systematic approach to understanding that uses observable, testable, repeatable, and falsifiable experimentation to understand how nature commonly behaves. The word commonly is unnecessary. It is used to understand how nature behaves, full stop. Also, I don't think this distinction will actually help poor Roger like he thinks it will. Operational science is the type of science that allows us to understand how DNA codes for proteins in cells. Yes. It is the type of science that has allowed us to cure and treat diseases, put a man on the moon, build satellites and telescopes, and make products that are useful to humans. Well, historical science plays an important role as well in making useful products. Understanding evolutionary history, for example, allows you to make predictions about where it will go in the future and take preventative measures in fields such as evolutionary medicine. Biblical creationists believe that God has created a universe that uses a set of natural laws that operate consistently in the universe. They do until those laws throw a wrench into their explanations, and then those laws magically no longer apply. Understanding how those laws operate is the basis for scientific thinking. Yeah. Some events defy natural laws. Name one. Christians refer to these things as miracles, but naturalistic science must find a way to explain these occurrences naturally, because these miracles either didn't happen, or they have natural explanations. This approach rejects miracles in the Bible because they cannot be explained using natural laws. Miracles in the Bible are rejected due to lack of evidence. Merely saying that an event occurred does not mean that it actually did. Such scientists occasionally try to explain the miracles in the Bible as natural phenomena, but this ultimately undermines the authority of God and His Word. The Bible has no authority, but that's a separate argument. What is historical or origin science? Interpreting evidence from past events based on a presupposed philosophical point of view. No, it is testing several models to see what fits the evidence the best. The past is not directly observable, testable, repeatable, or falsifiable, so interpretations of past events present greater challenges than interpretations involving operational science. Well, not directly, but they can indefinitely be observed, tested, or falsified. Neither creation nor evolution is directly observable, testable, repeatable, or falsifiable. Evolution has been directly observed, tested, and repeated, however. It is also falsifiable. Each is based on certain philosophical assumptions about how the Earth began. Nope, that's just creation. Evolution is based off of both direct and indirect testing, and is based on a long history of being the model that best fits the data. Naturalistic evolution assumes that there was no God, and biblical creation assumes that there was a God who created everything in the universe. I'm starting to think that Roger doesn't understand what naturalistic evolution is, and I'm starting to get tired of repeating myself. Naturalistic evolution makes no assumptions about whether or not God exists. Starting from two opposite presuppositions and looking at the same evidence, the explanations of the history of the universe are very different. No, forcing evidence to fit a conclusion will give you a very different conclusion than letting models be tested to see which one fits the best. The argument is not over the evidence is the same. It is over the way the evidence should be interpreted. No, when you deny evidence, the argument is 100% over the evidence. Evolutionists often claim that people misuse the word theory when discussing science and don't make a distinction between a scientific theory and the common use of the word theory, because people do misuse the word. You may say, I have a theory about why Mr. Jones' hair looks funny, but that theory has never been compared to a broad set of observations. This is not the sense of a theory in science. Correct. In light of this, few would argue that there are different types of theories. I think there's a typo in this sentence, and Roger's trying to say that most would say that there are different types of theories, which is fair. So it would be good to refine this term further to avoid any baiting and switching of the word theory. Except that's exactly what Roger is going to do. He's going to define theory in a way that no scientist uses, and then try and bait and switch that definition with the one that everyone except for Roger uses. Just as it was valuable to distinguish between operational and historical science, it would be good to do the same with operational and historical theories. Except those aren't separate categories. A theory is a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world that can incorporate facts, laws, inferences, and tested hypotheses. There is no reason to separate operational and historical theories, as the definition applies equally to both. A scientific operational theory is operational theory, an explanation of a set of facts based on a broad set of repeatable and testable observations that is generally accepted within a group of scientists. This is not a definition used in science, given this whole distinction is not one used in science either, so define it how you want, I guess. That evolution has been elevated to the status of an operational theory, and fact, in the opinion of some, is not due to the strength of the evidence, but in spite of it. I would love to see what evidence Roger is referring to, because it is absolutely due to the overwhelming amount of evidence in favor of evolution that it is determined to be a theory, and in the opinion of some, a fact. As evolutionary ideas are interpretations of past events, they are not as well founded as testable scientific theories like Einstein's theory of relativity or Newton's theory of gravity. Okay, two things. First of all, evolutionary history is a model of past events. Evolution is a model of current, as Roger puts it, operational science. Therefore, evolution belongs to Roger's category of operational theories. Secondly, it is as well founded as testable scientific theories because it is a testable scientific theory. Roger assumes that evolution is just like creationism, which is 1, false, and 2, hilarious, because that means that due to his accurate representation of creationism and his straw man of evolution, this whole time Roger is accidentally trashing on his own worldview while not managing to land a single blow on evolution. These theories offer predictable models and the ability to conduct experiments to determine their validity in different circumstances. Oh my god, just like evolution. Molecules to man evolution does not offer this opportunity because these events happened in the past. Except abiogenesis and evolutionary history does offer the opportunity because they both have predictable models and the ability to experiment to determine their validity. You know what doesn't? Creationism. Therefore, evolution is not an operational theory. Except by Roger's own definition, it is an operational theory. For these reasons, evolution could be considered a historical theory, along with creation models and other origins theories. As we are about to see, according to Roger's definition, pretty much anything could be considered a historical theory. But while evolutionary history may fall under the category of historical theory, even Roger's own definition fails to exclude evolution from an operational theory. Historical theory, an explanation of past events based on the interpretation of evidence that is available in the present. I mean, if that's how you want to define it, it has nothing to do with the actual word theory and how it's used in science, but go ahead. Evolution fits this definition of theory, but it relies on the assumption of naturalism. No, it relies on evidence. In the naturalistic scientific community, evolution has become a theory that is assumed to be an established fact and not an explanation. No, it is a theory that fits the evidence well. Evolution is the prevailing paradigm, and most scientists have stopped questioning the underlying assumptions that the theory is based on. For good reason. The underlying assumptions have been well proven and thoroughly tested. Creationists develop theories too, in light of biblical truth, but they are not as widely accepted by scientists. Gee, I wonder why. Probably because they aren't actual scientific theories like evolution is. All interpretations or theories of the past are based on assumptions and cannot be equated with facts that are observable in the present. Interpretations and theories are not synonymous. This holds true for creationist or evolutionist theories. It doesn't, because there are key differences, like evidence and testability, that are overlooked by Roger's definition of historical theory. Evolution also relies heavily on the assumption of uniformitarianism, a belief that the present is the key to the past. Correct. According to uniformitarians, the processes in the universe have been occurring at a relatively constant rate. Unless we are talking about the 19th century, then no uniformitarians have said that. This is a flat-out straw man. One of these processes is the rate of rock formation and erosion. No, it isn't. No modern geologists consider the rate of formation and erosion to always occur at a constant rate. If rocks form or erode at a certain rate in the present, uniformitarians believe that they must have always formed or eroded at nearly the same rate. No, they don't. If Roger actually talked to a uniformitarian, he might have a better understanding of what it actually means. This assumption is accepted even though there are no observations of the rate of erosion from the distant past, and there is no way to empirically test the erosion rate of the past. It isn't accepted. It's a straw man. However, the Bible makes it very clear that some events of the past were radically different from those we commonly observe today. No, the Bible asserts that some events were different from those we observe today, although modern geologists would agree that catastrophism played a role in the formation of the Earth as we know it today, just not the same events. Noah's flood, for example, would have devastated the face of the Earth and created a landscape of billions of dead things buried in layers of rock, which is exactly what we see. Except we don't see billions of dead things buried in layers of rock. We see fossils that in no way, shape, or form resemble what you'd expect if a flood of that magnitude occurred. Just as evolutionists weren't there to see evolution happen over several billion years, neither were creationists there to see the events of the 6 days of creation. No, but the evidence was there to see evolution happen. The difference is that creationists have the creator's eyewitness account of the events of creation, while evolutionists must create a story to explain origins without the supernatural. First of all, Christians don't have an eyewitness account. They have an account that was passed down through generations and lacks historic credibility. Scientists don't create a story, they create different models and test each one to see what fits the evidence the best. Just because many scientists believe the story does not make the story true. It doesn't make it true. The overwhelming amount of evidence and observations makes it true. Believing the Bible and the information that has been revealed to us by our Creator gives us a foundation for thinking, including our thinking about science. Well, it certainly gives you a foundation. Not a very good one, but definitely a foundation. Good operational science can provide us with answers to many questions about the world around us and how it operates, but it cannot answer the questions of where we came from and why we are here. Nope, and that's why we use historical science. Those questions are outside the scope of operational science. Yep, and that's why we use historical science. But we are not left without an answer. That is correct, because thankfully all the evidence points to evolutionary history. God has given us the answers to those questions in His Word, the Bible, except those answers aren't supported by the evidence. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. Have a great day.